Hello. Okay. I think I'm online. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? How was our night? And how has been, all the online classes? I want to welcome you once again. It's good to have you. Okay. Uh, we're having BAM 405, that is business psychology. And we started the class a few weeks ago. And today is going to be the last contact for this class. Today is going to be the last contact for this class, and I hope that from now onwards we're able to complete our assignments. In the first class we had, I think I gave us an assignment which I want to believe most of us will have done and already submitted to the assignment that to the email address that I sent. Okay, so today, while we talk about the last two topics we have for today, I also intend doing a brief review, just more like a rundown of all that we have done so far. So first of all, this morning we are going to discuss personnel selection. I'm already sharing my screen. I'm going to discuss personnel selection, training, and assessment. Personnel selection, training, and assessment. I'm going to be very fast and very brief as well. Personnel selection, training, and assessment. Now, this topic has to do with, we're discussing business psychology, and we have looked at many important topics under this subject matter. I would said is the science of the study of human behavior and how you apply it in organizations, in work, in every sphere, in order to bring about achievement of the organization's objectives. So we looked at understanding human behavior, we looked at leadership, we looked at managing conflicts, negotiations, and all of that. And today we're looking at personnel selection, training, and assessment. Okay, and the key words here is selection, training, and assessment. Selection has to do with deciding who is right for a particular job. After selection, you have to train. Training means impacting knowledge and skills. Okay, then assessment means when they are working, how do you assess them? How do you check the progress of their work? Okay, so when you see job advertisement, for instance, it always comes with what is called a job description. And a job description is a detailed explanation of all that is required on a particular job or all that is going to be done on that job. And one of the reasons why employees include job description is so that the prospective employee has an idea of what is going to be coming into that institution or into that organization to do. What job is he going to do? What responsibility is he going to carry out? So enlisting the job description helps him to have a pictorial view of whether there are things is going to be able to do. All right. So when you read, often this is done to help psychologists and all of that. There are two ways that you can have your job analysis. Okay, you can develop your job analysis by making the details of all the tasks. Okay, then also you can use what is called a worker oriented approach. Okay, and it describes the characteristics required of the worker to satisfactorily perform a job. It's actually called job specification. So job description and job specification are the two key things we do when we analyze a job. When you carry out job analysis, in job analysis, you carry out job description, which is a detailed description of what is to be done, and job specification, which is a detailed description of what the prospective employee, I beg your pardon, must have to be able to carry out that job. So these two keys are necessary when you want to select employees. The employee should you have to know what the employee is going to do. Then you also have to know what the employee must have, that is job specification, to be able to carry out the job that is coming in for. And we said we have several ways. Observations, surveys, interviews are used to obtaining information required for what job analysis. So now, in selecting candidates, you have to analyze and carry out tests. Okay, and there are different ways of carrying out tests. So once a company identify potential candidates for a position, the candidate's knowledge, skills, and other abilities must be evaluated and compared with the job that is to be done. And these evaluations can be done by carrying out tests. They can write tests, different types of tests. They can be interviews. Okay, they can be interviewed. They can be given different types of exercises and work to be done. So they are used to identify the personality characteristics, that is to be done. For example, imagine you're bringing in somebody as a customer care representative. Okay, now your question is, what is that customer care representative going to be doing? That will be his job description. Then what do you require of them to be able to carry out that job that has been described? So probably they should be extroverted. They should have good communication. They should have a disposition that is welcoming. They should smile, relate well with people. They must have a personality that is welcoming. There are certain personalities that they are scary. They are, you might want to put them in the force. Okay, so these are kind of things you look out for when you are trying to bring people in to a particular system. So you have to carry out tests for them, and there can be different types of tests. There are IQ tests, there are integrity tests. There are also physical tests, even drug tests, fitness tests. All these are various types of tests that could be conducted on the prospective employees. Then you also have to carry out interview. Okay, you have to carry out an interview. Interview is when you now meet with the prospective employees. Okay, and most smaller corporations, mid-level corporations require interview where you get to meet with the prospective employees. Okay, or you get to meet with them, you get to talk with them, you get to know them, get to see a lot about them, because in an interview situation you observe many things. Okay, you look out for their social factors, their relational, which has to do with their relational abilities. You look at the body language, you look at a lot of things, their agreeableness to the to the job that they are applying for. You look at such as their hand gestures, their confidence, the way they nod, the way they smile. You get to look out for all those things. You get to meet them. You get to rate their communication ability, their openness, their ability to manage pressure and fear. All of these things are things you are able to determine when you carry out an interview. Don't forget the topic is personnel selection, that is selection of staff, training, and what assessment. Okay, so we're still under personnel selection. Okay, and now we're under interview. We've already looked at tests, selection, test, interview. So now there are two major types of interviews. We have structured interview and unstructured. Okay, the first type of interview we have is unstructured interview. Let me start from that one. And the second type is what is called structured. Now, in an unstructured interview, the interviewer or interviewers ask different types of questions. It's not prepared. Okay, one candidate might ask about career goal, another one might ask about their work experience. In an unstructured, it's not pattern, it's not having a specific way that is going to be done. So, and it's just randomly selecting questions from different areas and asking. It's called an unstructured interview. But then we also have structured interview. And in structured interview, all the candidates will get to answer the same question. Now, in unstructured, which we discussed earlier on, all the candidates might not be answering the same question. So if one goes in and comes out, the other candidates cannot say, what questions were you asked? Okay, they can ask, what questions were you asked? I was asked this, I was asked that, but there's no guarantee that when you go back inside, it's the same questions that you might be asked, totally different questions. That is unstructured. But in a structured pattern, everybody is likely going to answer the same questions because we are testing for the same thing. So the interviewer asks the same questions to every candidate, and the questions are prepared in advance. Okay, with this approach, the interviewer can accurately compare two candidates because everybody is answering the same question. And if everybody is answering the same question, I would like to see the individual responses to the same question. Okay, so with this approach, we can be proper comparison to determine which of the candidates best fits your specification. Okay, so that is about selection. In selection, you will have to call for prospective candidates. Make sure you have a detailed analysis of the job description and specification. After that, during the selection process, you have to carry out different kind of tests and carry out what interviews also. Then when they now after the selection process, you have to go through training. And we said training is an important element if workers must perform properly and adequately. um so of course, when people are taken in, there has to first of all be an orientation. You don't take people in without giving them an adequate orientation of what the work is and what they are going to be doing. So it's important. Most jobs begin with an orientation period during which the new employee is provided information regarding the company, its history, its policies, its protocols, how it operates, its benefits, its requirements, and all of that. There will be training that are specified to the job, okay, on how it operates, how it does things. Okay, so most of all these kind of trainings can be formalized. Okay, now generally speaking, we have different types of training. We have what is called method of training, the on the job method of training and off the job method of training. And the style that you choose to use is dependent on the circumstance. On the job method of training, we have things like job rotation, special project, apprenticeship. Okay, off the job method of training, we have special training, mentorship, um, uh, conferences, case studies. These are of the job method of training. So the type of training method you use is largely dependent on um, the type of job that you're bringing in workers for. But know it that workers have to be trained. There has to be proper training and mentorship when you bring people in. And that kind of training is actually called induction training. And induction training has to be carried out for workers when they are newly brought into an establishment. Okay, it's called an induction training. Okay, so don't forget uh, about training. Workers have to be trained, have to be given all the required knowledge, skills, and assets for them to effectively carry out their job. So personnel selection, training, and the last part of the topic is what we call um, assessment. Assessment. Assessment is a form of evaluation, as you can see um, on our manual. I'm sharing my screen, and I hope you can see it. Okay, if it's called okay. So when you are evaluating employees, when you are assessing employees, you are evaluating them. Okay, and what is evaluation is checking for employees that are um to check the progress of employees. I beg your pardon. Okay, to check the progress of employees. How are they working? How are they doing? How are they faring? How are they doing on their jobs? So in that assessment, we are trying to determine the extent to which their work is helping us achieve the organizational objectives. Okay, so typically it involves designing what is called a performance appraisal system. This is where performance appraisal comes in. As you can see, the word that is used, performance appraisal, to carry out a performance assessment. Now they are designed, these systems are designed to evaluate whether each employee is performing on her job satisfactorily. Okay, research and implement ways that we have to evaluate staff in a very fair way and get the best outcome. Fairly evaluated work helps employees to do their jobs better, improves the likelihood of people being on the right jobs for their talent, maintains fairness, and identify company and individual training needs. Okay, now there are different types of performance appraisal, and it can be done several times in a year, but most companies, organizations carry out performance appraisals twice in a year. Okay, when it's done once in a year, it's called annual performance appraisal, and when it's done twice in a year, it can be it's biannual. That's 2 times a year. Okay, so there are steps that you carry out and carrying out, in performing the appraisal, to the end at the end, to which the employees might get to meet with the human resource agents or staff of the organization. Okay, so you will analyze their work with respect to their job description, their job analysis, their challenges, their weaknesses, their prospect on the job. You analyze their strengths, analyze how they are doing by carrying out a SWOT analysis. All these are factors that are embedded in carrying out performance appraiser. Okay, so the meeting, now let me just quickly explain one of the major types of performance appraisal that can be used. Okay, the method of performance appraisal that is largely applied, which is very effective also, is called the 360-degree method of appraisal. The 360-degree method of what appraisal. Now, one approach to performance appraisal is called the 360-degree feedback appraisal. Okay, in this system, the employee's appraisal derives from a combination of ratings by supervisors, peers, employees, supervised by the employee, and from the employee, himself or herself. So the purpose of 360-degree system is to give employee, and supervisors different perspective of the employee's job performance. Okay, so this is how it works. It's mostly a rating system that involves 3 types of raters. So I'll be giving the employee is going to be given a series of questions in which they will rate themselves, after which the supervisor will rate them. Then lastly, the human resource manager or consultant is going to rate them. So you're having 3 sets of ratings. First of all, there will be a self-rating by the employee. He's going to rate himself on the job. You assess yourself, you check how you're performing with respect to a series of questions. After you rating yourself, secondly, the supervisor or departmental head will also rate you. Then lastly, the human resource department also is going to rate you against the backdrop of what has been rated by yourself and the second, which is your departmental head. So this kind of appraisal system are very, very effective in the sense that because you have rated yourself and there's another rating, then human resource eventually rates you and looks at all the responses from which we can develop what is called training needs. So we don't just carry out training randomly. How do we know the way to train workers? By evaluating and carrying out a detailed examination of what is called their performance appraisal. So from performance appraisal, after the appraisal, we can get to know where there are challenges, where there are problems and weakness, thereby determining the training system that will work. Okay, so that is about that for personnel selection, training, training and assessment. Okay, don't forget what we talked about. We'll review that very quickly. Then lastly, last topic we have is what is called is the topic research, design, and method. Research, design, and method. We have spent half of our time, or more than half already. So research design is the specific method a researcher uses to collect information, analyze the information, and interpret it. Research design and method is the specific way in which a researcher uses to collect information or data, analyze that data, and interpret it. So there are, in business psychology, there are several types of research systems that can be used. And we're going to quickly look at 6 of those research methods that you can use to collect information. Don't forget, you're dealing with workers, you're dealing with employers, and you would want to examine and understand what is happening in the work environment. So let's look at how we can collect information and analyze it. The first is what is called case study. Case study. So from the name, you study a particular case. So this is what it happens, that in this case, you have an investigator who has maybe interest to know about an individual or group of individuals or a company. So you decide to make that your object of focus where you're studying. So maybe there's a condition or there's something you want to study within that place, and you now do a follow-up. So the investigator, who of course could be in different fields, it could be a physician, it could be medical investigation by a case study you can use, it can be a psychologist, counselor, it can be an educator. Okay, so you document as your by that study. By that research, you are documenting all that you're observing, what you're seeing. You can develop a questionnaire, to a group of persons regarding that particular case. So during this time, over the period which you're preparing that case study, you document, and at the end of the day, you are able to get your result. But look at the steps that we follow in carrying out case study. First of all, there is a condition or problem. So what do you want to research on? For instance, you want to research maybe something about maybe school, poor habit of students towards lectures, for instance. That's the research that you want to carry, you want to conduct. Or why is it that students fail certain subject, or why is it that some students pass more than others? You want to carry out a research. Okay, so you look at the brief history of what you're looking at, the challenges that have been in the past, how things have been. You look at the history, you look at what has been done about it in terms of first of all, your problem, you look at the history. Then what have been the ways that has been developed in the time past. We call it treatment. What are the ways that have been developed in the time past to manage that situation? Then what have been the results? Okay, what have been the result based on your findings? Okay, then you have a follow-up at the end of the day. So that's how case study is used. Okay, that's how case study system is used. The second one is called research. Survey, survey research. The first method I said earlier on is what case study. The second one is called survey. Now, survey involves interviewing and administering what questionnaires or written surveys to a large number of people. So this one is not, except if you have a target audience, but generally you can even go out to the streets depending on what you're carrying out, or if you have a sample of place of people that you're trying to work with or work on. So you administer questionnaire, you have developed maybe a 20 number questionnaire, and you go around administering that questionnaire so that people can give you their response. So involves interview, administering questionnaires or written surveys to a large number of people. Now, the investigator now analyzes these questionnaires. Now, questionnaires can be, after being carried out, you prepare them in to make the work easier, what is called an closed-ended questionnaire, where you get yes or no answers, or agree, strongly disagree. The point in closed-ended questionnaires is that it is always definite. You're able to get definite response. It doesn't require explanation. Okay, and there's no ambiguity to it. So you do that, you carry out your survey. Carry out your survey. So survey system is one way that you can use to get what information for research. After when you come and analyze your information into various categories before you can draw your conclusion. So imagine you carried out survey with about 100 persons and the questionnaire. At the end of the day, you cannot categorize those that strongly disagree on. Maybe you had 10 questions that you asked. So question, how many agreed, how many disagreed, how many had no option. That categorization that you do at the end of the day for each of the questions, maybe question one, you might say, okay, 50 people agreed, 10 people are undecided, 40 disagreed, or 30 disagreed, and another 10 did not answer. So based on that survey, using your questionnaire, you can get your responses you can draw your conclusions. Then the third system is called observational research. Now, there could be several limitations, of course, in each of the surveys, but scientists may choose to observe their subject. Okay, it's called observational research, and it can take place even in the laboratory or even natural observation. Okay, now in the laboratory observation, you have a sample and you have a control where you observe the outcome. You observe the outcome. If it's a hospital related or health related, you observe the clinical outcomes. Okay, in each research method, observers record participants' behavior with the environment. Environment research reduces the possibility of subjects giving misleading accounts of their experiences, not taking the study seriously, being able to remember details, or feeling too embarrassed to disclose everything that happened. Yes, so these are just a few challenges, but note that from the word observational research is you document based on everything that you are observing, what you're seeing. Okay. The next is what is called correlation research. Correlation research. Now, a correlation is a relationship between two variables or two factors that can change. Variables may include characteristics, attitude, behavior, and all of that. The goal of correlation research is to determine whether or not a relationship exists between two variables. If the relationship does not exist, the number of commonalities, if a relationship does exist, the number of commonalities in that relationship, it increases. Okay, so that correlation, which is quite a long system, but I will not explain for the want of time, can be used. So you're trying to just determine that if there's a relationship between two variables. So you could have a positive correlation showing that yes, there's a correlation or there's a relationship. You could have a negative correlation showing that there's no relationship, and you could have a non-existent correlation. In other words, it doesn't even exist at all. There's no relationship between the two variables. So positive correlation means that there's a strong correlation. As one increases, the other one also increases. Negative correlation, as one increases, the other one decreases. And non-existent correlation is that there's no relationship between those two variables at all. Okay, I want to believe we are still together. Okay, we have just 10 minutes more. Then we have the fifth one, which is experimental research. Experimental research. Now, just as the name implies, you carry out your research by carrying out what? Experiment. Okay, experiment. The goal of experimental research is to test the effect of an independent variable, which on a dependent variable. A number of factors can affect the outcome of any type of experimental research. For instance, investigators face the challenge of finding samples that are random and representative to the population being studied. Additionally, researchers must guard against the experimental bias, okay, where you're not giving your results based on sentiment. Okay, experiments are very sensitive, and you're going to be getting out results that everyone is going to be working with. So you have to have the right equipment, tools, and the right environment to be able to carry out experiment. Experiment can be expensive, can be very, have a lot of conditions to be able to use in carrying out research design, but it's also one of the systems that we use. Then lastly, we have the cross-cultural research. Okay. Now the thing is, cross-cultural is important because we do not have the same factors affecting everywhere in the same way. I was listening to the commissioner of Lagos State a couple of days back, and while he was being interviewed about the pandemic of coronavirus, and he was saying something that I picked from that, even if the Western world come up with vaccines for managing the virus, they still have to do more extensive research because these are two different locations. Could it possibly be that the virus can thrive, can be dealt with by what has been developed both in Western worlds and environment and also here? Is it the same? Because there are certain factors that might make it work there that might not make it exactly so here. So you see the difference in cross-cultural environment. What is obtainable in one place might not be necessarily obtainable in another place. So developmentalists may conduct cross-cultural research designed to review variations that exist across different groups of people. Okay, so that is that about cross-cultural research. Okay. If you're carrying out research on corruption, for instance, there might be certain factors that might be obtainable in maybe Nigeria, for instance, with all due respect, that might not be obtained in other parts of the world. One of the because, for instance, poverty may contribute to corruption in Nigeria, but poverty might not be so much of an issue in other Western countries that are first class economies, because food might not be a problem, but in places like this, even feeding might be a challenge for an average person. So you can see that can make him become corrupt. We're looking at cross-cultural research, but if you go to another place, it might not be feeding that might be a problem. So you see that feeding might not be a factor in some other places. This is what cross-cultural research has to do in carrying out what survey. So, and this is the last part of the course. So let me quickly do a review, a rundown of all we have looked at from the beginning of the class. Okay. We looked at we looked at the definition of business psychology, an importance, objective. We looked at human behavior. Okay, we looked at the classification of human behavior. We looked at molecular and moral behavior. We looked at overt and covert. We looked at voluntary and involuntary human behavior. We looked at the 4 personality types. Okay, after which we proceeded to motivation. And under motivation, we studied motivation under 4, different types under 4. Is it 4 that we looked at? Theories of motivation. We looked at Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of need. Okay, after that, we looked at the 2-factor theory, that is Frederick Herzberg 2-factor theory. Okay, where we looked at hygiene and motivation factors. We looked at McGregor's theory of X and Y. Then we looked at expectancy theory. Okay, I think those are the 4 theories that we looked at of motivation. Then we proceeded to talk about the psychology of leadership. We defined leadership. We looked at different leadership theories that has evolved. Okay, we looked at leadership theories. We looked at the great man theory. We looked at the trait theories. Time will fail us to review, but we have already explained all of this. We looked at transformational leadership theory. We looked at contingency theory. And lastly, we looked at behavioral theories, okay, which you said behavioral theory was based on the belief that leaders are made and not born. Okay, great leaders are made, and it is the opposite of great man leadership that believe that what leaders are born, okay, and not made. Okay, so after which we looked at general qualities and characteristics of leadership. We said leaders are honest, they are competent, they look forward, that's their future. You see, they can inspire, they are very intelligent, fair-minded. In other words, they consider people a lot. They are not, they do not show partiality. They are broad-minded and courageous. straightforward, and also imaginative, from which we looked at conflict resolution and negotiation. We said a conflict is anything that disrupts the smooth flow of work. We looked at intrapersonal conflict, interpersonal conflict, and intergroup conflict. And we said a conflict is not always bad. We looked at the 6 things that can cause conflict. We looked at organizational structure, limited resources, task interdependence, when you have to work together with others, incompatible goals, people having different goals in the workplace, personality difference, and communication problems. After which we looked at ways to manage conflict. We looked at the different systems that are available for managing conflict. We looked at accommodation, compromise, collaboration, avoidance of conflict, and lastly, what? Competition. Okay. We looked at that. Then we looked at negotiation, the 5 phases of negotiation. The first being investigation. We looked at investigation. We said determine your what is called your partner. Then presentation, bargaining, and what? Closure. So the first is investigation. You know what you want. Secondly, determining what your best alternative to a negotiating agreement is called your partner. Then from which you said you present your case, you bargain, then you close. And we looked at the strategies in negotiation, both distributive and what? Integrative view. Then we said avoid common mistakes in negotiation. Okay, we looked at those mistakes in negotiation, like what? Failing to accepting first offer might be a poor negotiation strategy. Letting your ego get in the way, pride, having unrealistic expectation. You're looking towards getting so much. Then we looked at the tips for negotiation, and after that, we now came to today's class: personnel selection, training, and assessment. We looked at all of that, and we wrapped it up with what? Research methods and design. I want to thank all of us for being a part of BAM 405 Business Psychology. Please prepare very well for your exam. Prepare very well and prepare for. And I already gave us assignment, so I expect that we will submit our assignment. The email address, which I don't remember the email address I gave us specifically, but if the one I read out is not the one I gave you, there's still no problem. It is nizelo8@gmail.com. I think I gave some other person's JPTS NC regional at yahoo.com. So anyone you can use. The first one 8 at yahoo. I'm sorry, at gmail.com. NYIZELO 8 at nizelo8@gmail.com. Thank you for being a part of this class. We hope to meet some other time. I wish you all the best. Thank you.